My name is Jason Fishbane. I'm the Chief Data Officer for UW-Madison. I want to introduce some folks that also will be speaking today. Jocelyn Milner, who's the Director of Academic Planning Institution and Research, is one of the co-sponsors of our UWRAP project, as well as one of the key, our key collaborators as we're building our analytics and reporting strategy for campus. Austin McKinney is also in academic planning and institutional research. Did I just say Austin McKinney? Wow. McKinney Austin. That's funny. Is also in academic planning and institutional research and also moonlights with the Office of Data Management and Analytics Services. Kayla Melland is also from the Office of Data Management and Analytics Services. I owe you at least like 5 beers for that, I'm sorry. Our goal today is to talk a little bit about the environment that we have here on campus around our data management and analytics world. Give you an update on what's going on with the UWRAP project, things like that. Couple of announcements before we get into the presentation. You may have noticed as you walked into the room, we're recording this session. Hopefully then we can make that available to folks who weren't able to make any of the 3 sessions that we had. And we will make the slides available as well once this is done. And we'll send that email out as to how to get access to those. Our agenda for today. Certainly a number of you, if not all of you, are very interested in what's happening with interactive reporting and the query library and Hyperion on campus. It's very important to understand that that is one project that's going on, and it's a project that fits into our overall data governance and business intelligence strategy for campus. And so part of the conversation today is around those programs. What we're doing in the data governance world and how this project fits into that. Talk a little bit about the Office of Data Management and Analytics, specifically around the website and how we're using that as a communication channel as we go forward, and some of the next steps that are going to be happening within the next 6 months, year, 18 months, et cetera. So certainly we want to talk about the retirement of the query library. I know many of you are interested in that and what that is going to mean. And again, it's how that project and how what we're doing in our analytics world, our reporting world, fits into an overall data governance program, an overall strategy. So the term business intelligence, what we really mean when we say that is it's the confluence of our data governance program and how we support the use of data on campus through policy, through architecture, through data definitions, and then the tools and the institutional knowledge that we have around that data and putting that together to make the data work for us as an asset. Much like the dollars we have on campus is an asset. Our data are also an asset and should be treated as such. We've come from this environment where a lot of things were done in the data on your own method, right? If you knew someone, or if you had access to someone who had access to data, or could get you access to data, you could do a lot of really cool things with that. If you didn't know someone, you may not be as fortunate. We did do some very good things. We have been doing some very good things on campus with the data that we have. But in a lot of cases, McKinney may be doing some really cool things over here with some data, and Kayla may be doing some things over here with some data, and they may be doing very similar things and not know that the other is doing it. And they may be getting different results because of that. And what we want to try to move to is an environment where the data is available for everyone in the appropriate format, and we're doing things institutionally. That doesn't mean that centrally. That means that we're supporting UW-Madison and the entire campus, but we're doing that at an institutional level. So we can do things more consistently, so that when we say we're counting students in this manner, everyone who's counting students in this manner gets the same results. Those types of things. So why do we have a data governance program on campus? 4 years ago, there were a number of people, some faculty members, administrators, who were tasked by the provost, Provost DeLuca at that time, to look at why are people not getting access to data they think they should have access to? How do people find data on campus? And that task force spent about a year studying the environment on campus and came up with a number of recommendations. One of those recommendations was the creation of my role. One of the other recommendations was to start an institutional data governance program, which we have done. It's been operational now for a couple of years. It's a programmatic approach to assigning responsibilities for how we manage data institutionally and what that means through the entire data management lifecycle, all the way from identifying what data we need to or want to collect and manipulate, all the way through to, and how long do we need to keep that data around? Is it 7 years? Is it forever? And what does that mean? And everything in between. And all those requirements that come through the data governance program then should be geared towards enabling folks on campus to be data literate and to use data in order to make decisions. The goals that we've identified for our data governance program, a data quality culture. If we're putting things out institutionally, we should all be assured that those data have been validated and meet the requirements that we think they meet. Little side note, we don't ever say data's wrong, right? It meets some requirement. It may not be the requirement you think it is, right? But data isn't wrong. And so that's why I was purposeful about how I said what I said, right? The data's there, and as long as you're accessing the data and you're using it in a manner that we understand and understand the requirements for what the analysis you're trying to build or utilize to make your decisions, and we all understand that, that's starting to build a data quality culture. We're creating structured accountability and responsibility for our data management on campus. Our data governance program is tri-sponsored by our provost, by our vice chancellor for finance and administration, and our vice chancellor for research and graduate education. They are accountable for all the decisions that the program makes. We have a data stewardship council, which consists of 16, 17 people from across campus in various roles. Schools, colleges are represented, institutional departments are represented, and those are the folks that are responsible for policy, for delegating responsibility for things like data definitions, those types of things. We want to facilitate the collaboration and education around using data, around the policies that get created, how do we implement the procedures that go along with those policies, facilitate consistent definitions and standard definitions where appropriate. Again, we may need to count students in multiple manners, right? There is not just one way to count students, but we should know, why is Alan counting students this way this time? And do we understand that? And why do we need to count it differently this time over here? And are those two definitions available for everyone to understand? And our program aligns with shared governance. We did run the idea of the program and the charter and how we were going to operate through the university committee when we first started it. This is a picture that we use to describe the scope of our data governance program. So again, it runs all the way from the accountability, the decision-making, through architecture and integration, everything in between. The key thing to point out on this slide, I think, we understand that this is a change for campus, and there's a huge change management component to this. We can't just snap our fingers and make this happen overnight. And so everything that we do, we're taking into account how do we make sure that we're implementing something that can be utilized on campus as we go forward. So one of the goals of the effort, data governance program, but then our different projects that we have within the program, is really to improve business intelligence on campus. We have a very distributed environment. That's not going away. And we want that. We want people to be able to get access to data and use data. But we have to have an environment that supports that consistently. We have a very complex environment. Some of the sources from which we report on data aren't controlled by UW-Madison, right? Our HR data, our shared financial data. Those are UW system data sources. And then we have users across campus that have varying levels of skills, right? Not everyone knows SQL. Not everyone is in the SIS and understands how the SIS is manipulating student data and the business processes that are used there. But they still need to get access to data to be able to report off of it. So how do we deal with the very user types that we have on campus? It's important to point out that, so we had this environment of data on your own, and until 2016, we did not have a central governed verified repository of reports. The query library existed, but if you had access to put something out to the query library, you could put it out there. And there wasn't a way that we institutionally verified that the information that was put out there is accurate, meets the requirements that we think it meets. And in some cases, the information that was out there wasn't maintained, right? So it was put out there 5 years ago and it's been running, but no one's actually gone back and looked at, have conditions changed that would mean that that report needs to change. We're starting to build now an institutional repository, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And one of the standards that we have within that is that things that get put into that have been validated and will continue to be maintained over time. There may be a life cycle for a report. It may only be useful for 6 months, and after 6 months, then we would want to remove it out of the repository. I mentioned earlier there are a number of initiatives around data governance and BI that are happening, not just the replacement of interactive reporting. This year, fairly soon, we'll be rolling out an online training for those who have access to restricted administrative data. And one of the requirements that we will start to implement is if you have access, you'll take the training on a periodic basis. I think it's biannually. We're formalizing stewardship of different data domains. It's fairly straightforward to say that the registrar's office and our university registrar is our steward of student data. We have a whole lot of data domains on campus, and we want to identify who the steward is, and the custodians are of those data, so that we understand the responsibility of who's going to ultimately say who gets access or not get access and why, as an example, or how the data is being managed for those data domains. The project to replace Hyperion certainly is a big one, and then we've implemented Tableau on campus, and McKinney's going to talk about that a little bit later on. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, our data governance and our BI program structure, our sponsors, our institutional leadership, campus leadership, and our data stewardship council. We do have a group of people who are responsible for creating institutional data definitions. And they are a group of analysts from, again, across different departments, schools, colleges on campus. that are working on this. As we continue to put out new content within our Tableau environment, we're also defining that content and making that content available, those definitions available. I mentioned before that we have a number of different user types on campus. And I think it's important to understand that as we talk about some of the decisions that were made for why we're doing what we're doing going forward. So we certainly have end users, right? We have folks who, there's 2 or 3 reports today in the query library that they run on a weekly or monthly basis. And they take that data and do something with it. And we need to be able to continue to support them going forward. We also have folks who are more power users or analysts. They're building their own queries. It may be that they're building queries for a department or a school college and building reports, and those reports are being run by end users within that department or school college. It may be that the dean comes to someone and says, hey, I need this information in 2 hours. Will you get it for me? And they go and do that and provide it to dean, associate deans, et cetera. Some of them may know SQL, but many of them don't. Because we've used Hyperion on campus, Hyperion's a tool that allows you to build your own queries without having to know SQL. And so we need to continue to support these folks going forward. We also have analysts that are at the institutional level who do very similar things. Academic planning and institutional research folks, that's one group. The registrar's office is a group. There's a number of different departments and groups on campus that do this for the institution. Same type of thing though, we need to be able to support them in what they're doing. You'll notice that one role that isn't listed is a BI developer. We have not had on this campus an institutional BI developer before. We've had a number of analysts who have built reports, queries, et cetera, but we haven't had a developer who is responsible for building more technical solutions, if you will, or more institutional reports at the institutional level. And we're starting to change that over time. So certainly we have the project to replace Hyperion, interactive reporting. And I think it's very important for folks to understand that there are actually 2 projects that are going on simultaneously that you may hear about. And it's important to understand the distinction between the 2. Hyperion is a tool that UW System Administration funds and operates for all the institutions within the system. And they have a project to replace the tool. And they refer to that project as UWBI. And so the scope of that project is to make the new tool available for all the institutions within the system. The other piece of scope that that project has is to take some of the queries that exist in the query library that are in the HR domain, shared HR queries. They're shared by multiple institutions in the system, and convert those into the new tool. That's the UWBI project. We UW-Madison have some visibility into that project, and we collaborate and have discussions around that project, but that's a separate project then from UW-Madison's project to take our queries that exist in the query library and convert them out of Hyperion into a new tool. That project we're referring to as UWRAP, so University of Wisconsin Reporting and Analytics Project, because we have to have an acronym. And again, those are, while certainly the projects are related, they're 2 distinct efforts. The decisions that we make for Madison may not be the same decisions that other institutions make for their campus. We would have loved to have sessions like this a lot earlier on But part of the reason we've had to wait is because we have been waiting for UW System to get to a point where then we can make some decisions on what we were going to do for Madison, right? So this project has been going on now for a couple of years, and we're now just getting to the point where we're at it, where we can now communicate to others, hey, here's what we're doing for Madison, this is why, here's the timeline, things like that. So certainly the two projects are related. UW System has chosen Oracle's suite of BI tools to replace Hyperion. You may hear OBIEE as the acronym there. And so if folks here access shared HR queries in the query library today, going forward, they will be accessing those through OBIEE. For Madison, we have decided not to initially migrate our Madison-specific queries into OBIEE. And I can talk in great detail about why, but really quickly for this discussion, Oracle's suite of tools, or OBIEE, requires that the data source from which you're pulling data is modeled in a specific format. And our data is not. And we could have gone through the process of remodeling data in order to make it work. That would have required a lot more resources that were available and a lot more time that was available for us that we felt we weren't going to be able to spend at this point in time. Plus, we have Tableau on campus. We're using Tableau. We have an environment in Tableau. We have a skill set of Tableau developers across campus. And for those big reasons, there are others, but for those big reasons, we've decided, at least initially, we are not using OBIEE for the Madison-specific queries. That doesn't mean we won't in the future, we just aren't now. The other piece to note, and going back to the types of users we have on campus, OBIEE does not allow for power users, analysts, to build their own ad hoc queries. So if, department chair, dean, someone comes along and says, I need this information from you in 2 hours, and it requires that you go grab a new data source in order to do that, OBIEE does not let you do that. Those of you who have Hyperion Desktop today, as an example, right? We need to replace that functionality. And so part of the project that we have on campus is looking to replace that functionality as well. We've gone through a pilot phase with a tool that we believe will work. We are making a recommendation later this month to campus leadership for the purchase of that tool. The important thing to know there is Hyperion, there is no timeline today for Hyperion Desktop going away. So if you use that today, you will be using that for the foreseeable future. At some point, we will need to replace it, and hopefully it will be with this tool that we recommend. But again, there is no timeline set for that. Our project structure for the UWRAP project, you can see here again, Provost Mangelsdorf and Vice Chancellor Heller are our campus leadership on this. Jocelyn and I are the sponsors of this project. And then again, there are people who have been working on this from different departments, different schools, colleges. Again, this has been going on for a couple years now. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to McKinney to talk about then how Tableau fits into this.
Okay, so Jason has mentioned Tableau a couple of times, and we thought it's worth spending a few minutes to sort of bring everybody up to speed, because some of you maybe have not already interacted with Tableau or maybe don't know what it is. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, what we've been doing with it, and what we're going to be doing with it. So Tableau is software that allows for the development and publication of interactive data visualizations. So there's sort of two components to be aware of. There's the development and then there's the publication. So development happens in a desktop environment. So there's a Tableau desktop application that a developer uses to point at a data source like info access, extract data and bring it into Tableau. And then they can build a data visualization or dashboard or report. They can make charts, figures, maps, tables, all sorts of pretty things. And they can add interactive elements that will allow an end user to customize what they're seeing, to look at things that they have specific interest in or to explore data. When the developer's done building this Tableau workbook, they can then publish it out to a server. So we have an institutional Tableau server, and once the Tableau workbook has been put on that server, then it becomes accessible to end users. So the importance of the distinction there is if you're an end user, you don't need any special software to interact with Tableau data visualizations. You actually access them and interact with them just through your regular web browser. So let's talk a little bit about what we've been doing with Tableau. We've actually had it on campus for a few years now. It started as a small pilot with just a couple of central administrative offices. But in the last few years, we've steadily been building it out and growing it in terms of the developer base and sort of how spread across campus the developer base is and building up that skill set. Also in terms of user base, over time we've been expanding out more and more across campus in terms of the end users who have already been interacting with some of these Tableau workbooks. And we've also been building up the infrastructure, things like the policies around how these workbooks are developed and the processes for publication, the standards for the workbooks, style guidelines, things like that. So you can see up there a list of offices across campus who have already been developing and publishing Tableau workbooks. And we're seeing sustained interest from new offices interested in getting involved with that. So I think you can expect to see more of that in the future. Here's an example of the type of Tableau visualization that's already out there, and maybe some of you have already seen something like this. So this is a dashboard that is connecting to info access, and it's bringing in degree information. And so the panel that we're looking at here is degree majors. And you can see the interactive elements I was talking about before on the left. These are filters and parameters. So right now, selections have been set to filter the data. So it's just looking at bachelor's degrees, and it's only looking at 3 majors. And so you can see this is summary information. It's aggregated. It's very useful from an analytical standpoint or a strategic standpoint, but it doesn't fill some of the more operational needs that a lot of people have that they use the query library for. So we're going to continue to make Tableau workbooks like this because these are useful for a certain segment. But we're also going to be doing a lot more development that gets into the row-level data that many of you are getting from the query library currently. So you don't need to know how many students graduated. You need to know who are the students who graduated. You don't need to see summary financial transactions. You need to see a transaction by transaction basis. Really sort of instigated by UWRAP, we started developing Tableau workbooks that will allow a user to make some selections and then export a data set to Excel, and then we'll be able to use that on their own computer in their work. And the functionality and content will be similar to the query library, although there should be far fewer of them. There are hundreds of queries in the query library, and we think we can consolidate a lot of that information. And we're going to be calling these Tableau workbooks institutional data exporters because universally that's what they're going to do. They're going to connect to institutional data, and then they're going to export an Excel file of the data that underlies the query. And here's an example of an institutional data exporter that's under development currently. And so this draws the same information that the visualization we looked at a couple of slides ago does. It's still degrees data. You can pull those same 3 majors of bachelor's, but the difference is instead of seeing a line chart of summary information, you would actually export an Excel file with the list of students and a lot of information about those students. And then lastly, I want to talk about just a couple of questions that we have anticipated, and just kind of want to let you know that we're working on solutions to these questions. So how will you be able to find what you're looking for? You are looking for a list of students who graduated with a certain major. How will you find that? We're working on developing a portal right now that's going to be on the website of the Office of Data Management and Analytics Services, data.wisc.edu. And when that's rolled out, that will function as a search engine. So you can type in a term like undergraduate time to degree, and that will point you to where we have these Tableau visualizations and potentially other reports that are related to that topic. How will you know what's available, right? Maybe you don't know what you're looking for because you don't know what's out there. That same portal will have functionality that will allow you to browse on a number of things. For instance, functional area. You know, you're interested in financial information or budget information. You'll be able to browse based on that. And then some other questions that we're working on addressing is how will you get access? We're working on a proposal right now, and that will go through the data governance process. And then what if you need something and you can't find it? Maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe it's a data need that we weren't aware of. We're working on a mechanism that will allow you to essentially request data or information that you can't find. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kayla to talk a little bit about data.wisc.edu.
Hello all. So for those of you that have not visited data.wisc.edu recently, there have been a few updates. Just one moment, let me pull this up here. So we decided to go with the new UW theme and really wanted to create a more user-friendly layout. We also wanted to use this webpage to kind of roll out the Office of Data Management and Analytics Services. You notice at the top of the page there is a link to our staff. You can come here to learn a little bit more about our staff and what they do if you just click on their names below. And we also have the training page. Currently this page is not available. We're in the process of creating restricted administrative data access training. Once that is available and we roll out other trainings, you'll be able to access those directly here. And then we also have our news page. This page we will keep updated with upcoming events. There will be other info sessions scheduled at later dates. You will be able to come here and decide whether or not those are going to be something you would like to attend or not. And I have added my So I've added my email here. If you have any feedback or suggestions, please feel free to send them to me whenever. All right, thank you.
So the next steps. McKinney mentioned the institutional data exporters. As we start to roll those out into production and start to look at replacing queries in the query library with those, we will have sessions around the use of those. You know, how we're expecting that they will provide value, how to use them, how they'll fit into your workflow, those types of things. So that will be coming in the next few months. As I mentioned earlier, we're recommending for the purchase of the new ad hoc query tool, and then there will be more information as we finalize that on a time frame to replace Hyperion Desktop. As of today, the plan is that starting in April, queries that exist in the query library, we will start to take offline as we're putting out new products to replace them. It's not going to be a big bang. It's not going to be all of a sudden one day, boom, it's gone, right? But over time, we will say, okay, these, I'm making up a number, 10 queries now. We now have a new place to get that information. You would go to the new place, and we would take the old query library queries offline. Because we're all data geeks here, and because we've had a couple of sessions already, and we've heard some questions and taken that feedback, I can anticipate some of the questions you may have now. So a couple things that we've heard before that I'll try to proactively answer. For those of you who have access to HR queries today, and have to go through multi-factor authentication, the way that authentication is going to work for the HR queries in OBI is the same. They're going to use OIM to do that authentication. That is not changing. Madison is not using that for ours, but the system is for HR information that comes directly from system-controlled systems. The way that we are going to look at providing access to our different dashboards, data exporters, things like that. So again, I'm making up a number, but these 10 queries may be satisfied by this institutional data exporter. If we know who had access to these 10 queries, that's the baseline for who has access to the new product, right? So the goal is not to make this complicated for everyone. The goal is to make it as easy as possible, right? And so we can set that up ahead of time. There may be some cases where, oops, you know, there was a mistake, we forgot somebody, whatever, and so at the same time, as McKinney mentioned, we also have to have a process for saying, hey, wait a minute, I need access to that, how do I request access? The long-term goal for requesting access to information for UW-Madison is that there's one spot to do it. You don't have to get a piece of paper and check off little boxes, right? We would do that through the portal through data.wis.edu. That's the long-term goal, and we're working towards getting there. And again, as Kayla mentioned, the website and email lists are, you know, along with these info sessions that are going to continue happening, that's going to be the vehicle for communication as we continue to go forward. And with that, I'll stop and ask if there are any other questions, comments, concerns. Yes, Alan.
To connect the dots between your first slide and the end of your story, so the first slide had your disconnected dots of the old UW-Madison, still status quo mostly, where you had to know somebody to get the data.
Mm-hmm.
And the Brave New World, which was aspirational, and it's all connected. If we are owners of some of those disconnected dots of data out there, is there a path that didn't exist before that we envision for those dots to get connected?
Sure. So we did not take a big bang implementation approach. Oh, let me repeat the question. Sorry. Alan's question was, if you are a owner slash user slash interested party in one of the disconnected dots of data today, a local data set as an example, is there a pathway to incorporate that into the institutional, you know, all integrated picture that we have around data? Yes? Fair?
Sure, especially with the interest of using these great new tools.
It's right.
Tableau.
So using the new tools to be able to get at that. When we started the data governance program, and as we go forward, we did not take a big bang approach to try to inventory all the data that exists on campus and do it all at once. We'd still be doing analysis, right? That's a never-ending initiative. So what we've done is we've done it in terms of a use case at a time, right? Alan's kind of setting me up because Alan was involved in one of the initiatives that we brought online, right? So as we learn about new data domains, new data sources, we do want to incorporate them within the overall infrastructure and the overall environment. And think about, is this something that has value to be reported on, not just for your local department or your local school college, but across campus? And as part of that, then we would build the plan to how we would make that happen. And we continue to learn about new initiatives, new data domains that have that institutional value, and we continue to work on bringing those within the overall scope of the program. Yeah? What happens to data center? So I'm not going to put Will on the spot, even though he's sitting back there. So data center is available, and we actually are not. There are some things that exist in the query library today that we believe the data center will replace, and that's the direction that we are headed today. So it's there. Other questions? You guys are an easy crowd. Yeah.
Are there any types of data that you are categorically excluding from coming into the centralized data warehouse?
The question was, are there other types or sources of data that we are categorically excluding from bringing into the data warehouse? Because you used the word categorically, I'm going to say no. I would love to bring all data into the data warehouse. Certainly, there's got to be a prioritization process for doing that. And there are initiatives to make that happen outside the scope of the UWRAP project. So I'll be very clear, none of the data sources change as part of the UWRAP project for Madison.
The question was prompted by the way you phrased data that is of use across the school versus
Yep.
just being of use to a particular school or department.
Yep. So we've had conversations with different departments about, hey, we have this data, does it make sense to bring it into info access, into the data warehouse to make it useful, right? And again, part of the prioritization process would be what other work is there, but the other part would be, so is it for that department or can it be used across, multiple? Yeah.
Will the data be a day old, like coming from the data warehouse, or is it active?
Yep, so again, as part of the UWRAP project, none of that changes, right? If info access is a day old, and info access will continue to be a day old. There are other initiatives that are happening that are longer term where that may change, but that's what it is today. Another question that was asked in an earlier session, again, wisdom wiser, that stays, this project is not affecting nor being affected by that. Yeah, in the back.
So if query library is still active, what do we do if a query that we have historically run is no longer working?
Yep, so if it's, we would have to have, we have pretty much said, the question was, sorry, gotta remember to repeat the question. The question was if there is a query that exists in the query library that's been run and it is no longer functioning the way that we think it should be, what do we do in the interim until these new suite of tools comes on board, right? So our resources today are pretty much devoted to getting the new stuff online, right? If it's something that, we can have a discussion about, oh, wait a minute, there's a huge priority to get this, we can have that discussion. But right as of today, there aren't resources available at the institutional level to work on those. All right, we're going to focus on getting it fixed, in the new world. In many cases, the person who developed that query is no longer here. So, some of that exists as well. Other questions? All right, so we'll stick around for a little bit if you do want to come up and talk, but otherwise that's what we had for today. Thank you.